Curious Lloyd.
The name Titanic became synonymous with the disaster after the ocean liner sank on its maiden voyage in 1912, causing more than 1,500 people to die. However, that tragedy is far from the world's worst maritime disaster. So here are 6 deadliest shipping disasters. Called the Greyhound of the Seas, the Lusitania was the fastest passenger liner of her time. Yet in the end, she wasn't fast enough to run the German submarine that sank her in 1915 in World War I. When it set for Liverpool, England from New York on May 1st, 1915, the Lusitania was only supposed to be carrying passengers. The Germans suspected that the Lusitania was carrying tons of ammunition bound for British guns. Before it left, Germany posted an ad in a New York newspaper warning civilians that the ship would be travelling through waters patrolled by enemy submarines. The captain of the Lusitania assured the passengers of the ship that it was in no danger. As the Lusitania neared Ireland, the captain received warnings that German U-boats were in the area and he should take evasive action. Instead, the captain slowed down. The German U-20 tracked down the Lusitania in 2:10 in the afternoon and fired a single torpedo penetrating the hull just below the waterline. 15 seconds later, another massive explosion happened, which split the boat in half. In just 18 minutes, the great ship went down. Nearly 2,000 people hit the freezing water. In the end, over 1,100 people died. The outrage was emitted and anti-German settlement exploded over America. The Americans put pressure on President Wilson to tell Germany to stop attacking passenger ships. The Germans also insisted that the Lusitania was carrying tons of ammunition destined to be fired on German troops, but decades later, secret British documents confirmed that the Lusitania was carrying ammunition. Regardless, the damage was done, and the American public opinion turned towards Germany on April 6, 1917. The United States Congress officially declared war on Germany and entered the First World War. La Jula was a Senegalese ferry owned by the government of Senegal. The ship takes its name from the Jula people of Senegal. Although the ship was Senegalese, it was actually built in Germany. The ship started operating in 1990 and generally sailed twice a week, loaded with passengers who were travelling between southern Senegal and Dakar, the capital and the largest city in Senegal. It often carried passengers who were carrying wares that they hoped to sell on the market in Dakar. By modern cruise ship standards, the ship was actually rather small. It was 79 meters long and 12 meters wide, and it had a gross tonnage of 2,100. With these dimensions, the ship had a carrying capacity of 580 passengers. On the day the ship left for its last voyage, September the 26th, 2002, however, it was carrying nearly 2,000 people, well over 3 times as many people as the ship was designed to carry. Of the passengers on board, 1,034 were carrying tickets. The rest of the passengers were either not required to carry a ticket because they were children or under the age of 5, or simply didn't have a ticket, which was common on the La Jula. Late on the night of the 26th, the ship sailed into the storm off the coast of Gambia, a country in West Africa. Confronted with fierce winds and rough sea, the ferry quickly capsized. According to reports, this occurred in only 5 minutes. When the ship capsized, passengers and cargo were flung into the sea. This immediately killed many people, and virtually all who managed to survive the capsizing were condemned to drowning anyway. As only 64 passengers survived the disaster, local fishermen were able to pick up some survivors and a few bodies. Relatively soon after this disaster, several hours before government rescue teams arrived to the scene of the accident on the morning of the 27th. Although the ship had been capsized, it remained afloat until 3 p.m. the day after the wreck. Passengers were still trapped in the ship at this time, and when the ship sank, it took these passengers with it to the bottom of the sea. The ship remains lost. Like so many other ship disasters, more people died as a result of the sinking of the La Jula, because there were so many passengers above maximum capacity on board the ship. What's more, overcrowding not only increased the death toll of the disaster, but also contributed to the capsizing of the ship to begin with. This is worth remembering, especially since some components of global shipping industry remain too loosely regulated. The Mont Blanc. On December the 6th, 1917, in Nova Scotia's busy Halifax harbour, the Mont Blanc, a French ship loaded with explosives and heading for Europe, where World War I raged, collided with the IMO, which was travelling to New York to pick up relief supplies for a war-raged Belgium. After the collision, fire broke out on the Mont Blanc, which soon ran aground on the Halifax waterfront, where a crowd had gathered to watch the burning ship. About 20 minutes after the collision, the fire ignited the 2,925 tons of explosives the Mont Blanc was transporting and sparked a massive blast. The force of the blast was so great that physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, referred to as the father of the atomic bomb, later studied the event in order to estimate the potential damage the nuclear weapons he was helping to develop. The blast killed scores of people instantly and devastated the surrounding area, toppling buildings, setting entire blocks ablaze and triggering a tsunami. Compounding the tragedy was in fact a blizzard struck in the region that night, hampering rescue and relief efforts. More than 2,000 people died as a result of what became known as the Halifax explosion, the largest man-made blast until the first atomic bomb was dropped on Japan in 1945, while more than 6,000 others were injured and some 9,000 people were left homeless. Doña Paz. On December the 20th, 1987, this Philippine passenger ferry, en route from Philippine Islands to La Teta, Manila, the capital city of the Philippines, collided with an oil tanker, caught fire and sank, killing as many as 4,000 people. The Doña Paz, built in 1963 in Japan, collided at night in the Tablas Strait with the Vector, a tanker carrying more than 8,000 barrels of petroleum products. The Vector's cargo burst into flames and fire quickly spread to the Doña Paz. Both vessels eventually sank. Passenger ferries are common in the Philippines, an archipelago of some 7,100 islands with a weak record of nautical safety. At the time of the collision, the Doña Paz, later referred to Asia's Titanic, was overcrowded. Although the exact number of people the vessel was carrying is unknown, the total might have been more than double its legal capacity. Additionally, the Vector was said to have been poorly maintained and operating without a license. Only several dozen people survived the disaster. The Willem Gustloff. On January the 30th, 1945, some 9,000 people perished aboard this German ocean liner after it was torpedoed by a Soviet submarine and sank in the frigid waters of the Baltic Sea. The Gustloff, named for a Nazi leader in Switzerland assassinated in 1936, was constructed as a cruise ship for the Nazis, Kraft Deutsche Freude, which meant strength through joy, which provided recreational activities for working class Germans. Adolf Hitler launched the 684-foot-long, 25,000-ton vessel in 1937. However, its cruising career was brief. After World War II began in 1939, the German military converted the Gustloff into a hospital, then later used it as a U-boat training school. In January 1945, as the Soviet army advanced on East Prussia, the Nazis launched Operation Hannibal, a mass naval evacuation of the German military personnel and civilians from the region. On January 30, as part of Operation Hannibal, the Gustloff left East Prussia port of Gotenhaven, bound for Kiel, Germany. The Soviet submarine S-13 soon spotted the Gustloff and blasted it with 3 torpedoes. The German liner sank within 90 minutes, about 12 nautical miles off the Stolot Bank near the present-day Poland. Historians now estimate that only about 1,000 of the approximately 10,000 people aboard the Gustloff survived, making it the deadliest maritime disaster in history. In the aftermath, the world learnt a little bit about the disaster for the variety of reasons. The Nazi regime kept news of the sinking out of the headlines and censored survivors, and some survivors kept quiet because they felt guilty about their German heritage and about their atrocities Nazi Germany had inflicted on millions of people. Although this isn't a big shipping disaster, I wanted to include this one due to the fact it is close to my heart and I've met some of the families from this event. On Saturday the 19th of December 1981, the Penlee Lifeboat, the Solomon Brown, a 47-foot Watson-class motor lifeboat, was launched in hurricane conditions to go to the aid of the MV Union Star that had engine failure and was being swept towards the southern coast of Cornwall. After the Solomon Brown had managed to rescue 4 people, radio contact was lost. Both vessels were subsequently wrecked, losing all hands. In a total of 16 people lost their lives, including the 8 voluntary lifeboatmen of Penlee. Both vessels were subsequently wrecked, losing all hands. In total, 16 people lost their lives, including the 8 voluntary lifeboatmen of Penlee. The MV Union Star was launched in Denmark just a few days prior to the incident. A mini bulk carrier registered in Dublin, Ireland. It sailed to the Netherlands to collect a cargo of fertilizer for its maiden voyage to Arklow in Ireland. There was a crew of 5: Captain Henry Morton, mate James Whittaker, engineer George Sedgwick, crewman Agostino Verasimo, and crewman Manuel Lopez. Also on board was Captain's family, who he had picked up en route. Captain's wife Dawn and teenager stepdaughters Sharon and Deneen, near the south coast of Cornwall, approximately 8 miles east of Wolf Rock. The ship's engines failed. The crew battled to restart them, informing the Coast Guard of the situation. Assistance was offered by the salvage tug, the Nord Holland, under Lloyd's open form salvage contract, but Captain Morgan refused the offer, waiting to see if the engineer and crew could restart the engines themselves. The weather deteriorated with wind gusts and up to 90 knots, 100 mph or hurricane force 12, and with waves up to 60 foot high. The powerless Union Star was being blown across Mounts Bay towards the rocks of Bosquen Point, near Lamorna Cove. As the ship was heading towards the Coast Guard at Falmouth scrambled a Royal Navy Sea King helicopter from 820 Naval Air Squadron from RNAS Codros. It used the call sign Rescue 80 during the mission. The aircraft was flown that night by United States Navy exchange pilot Lieutenant Commander Russell Smith, assisted by Lieutenant Steve Marlowe and Lieutenant Kenneth Doherty, and leading air crewman Martin Kenny of the Royal Navy. The Sea King was unable to get a line to the Union Star due to the weather, so the Penlee Lifeboat was launched at 8:21 p.m. The lifeboat's coxswain Trevelyan Richards repeatedly took the lifeboat alongside the coaster to try and rescue the 8 people on board, before managing to take 4 people off. The lifeboat made a further attempt to rescue the remaining 4 when radio contact was lost. It was subsequently discovered that the lifeboat had been completely wrecked with the loss of her 8 crew. The coaster was also lost. There were no survivors. Coxswain William Trevelyan Richards was posthumously awarded the institution's gold medal for the manner in which 4 people were taken off the coaster. The remainder of the crew, second coxswain mechanic James Stephen Madron, assistant mechanic Nigel Brockman, emergency mechanic John Robert Blewett, crew members Charles Thomas Greenhall, Kevin Smith, Barry Robertson, Tory and Gary Lee Wallace were posthumously awarded bronze medals. Lieutenant Commander Smith, USN, the Sea King pilot, later reported that the greatest act of courage that I have ever seen, and I am ever likely to see, was the penultimate courage and dedication shown by the Penlee crew when it was manoeuvred back alongside the casualty in over 60-foot breakers and rescued 4 people shortly after the Penlee had been bashed on top of the casualty's hatch covers. They were truly the bravest 8 men I have ever seen, who were also totally dedicated to upholding the highest standards of the RNLI. I also want to mention the RNLI solely relies on donations, and it is a non-government funded service. The RNLI is a charity that saves lives at sea, that provide on-call a 24-hour lifeboat search and rescue service around the UK and Ireland, that provide on-call a 24-hour lifeboat search and rescue service around the UK and Ireland, and a seasonal lifeguard service. With their lifeboats, lifeguards, safety advice and flood rescues, they are committed to saving lives. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and I'll catch you Sunday with another video.